This episode is brought to you by Patriot Gold. Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour, guys. I am absolutely giddy at this week's guest, a man who needs no introduction and who has far better things to do with his time than to be on this show. Dr. Drew Pinsky, a talk show legend. Um, I've met a lot of famous people in my career, and of all the ones I've met, you are probably the one who is the most down to earth, which
Oh,
is really kind of odd given how universal your name recognition is. And this is going to sound like a Barbara Walters question, but in all seriousness, how do you stay this known and beloved for that long without getting a chip on your shoulder?
very low self-esteem. I recommend it. Low self-esteem is a useful instrument. I think the self-esteem movement has been a complete bust. And as someone with low self-esteem, it keeps you honest. It keeps you checking yourself. It keeps you always grounded. And the other thing is, if you've really had a day job, right? Like I worked for 30 years in the trenches, and 20 of those were like severe workaholism, practicing medicine in multiple domains, in intensive care settings in the hospital, in the acute hospital, the outpatient, psychiatric setting, addiction medicine. And if that doesn't humble you, nothing will. So believe me, all this stuff to me is just a really interesting creative endeavor to do good in a different environment, but I don't take it very seriously at all.
One of the things I was just on Jordan Peterson's podcast, and he alluded to something, and I very much want to hear you speak about this as a professional. He talks a lot about, and I think increasingly in recent times, about the prevalence of dark triad people in our culture and how this is something that is not spoken about much. One of the things that I talk about a lot is we're taught in school from a very early age that, we're all basically the same. Maybe we learn a little differently. You like sports, I like geography, but there is a significant percentage of the population that maybe they looked like us, but their thinking is fundamentally alien. And these people are also often drawn to powerful positions, and the consequences of this are often nefarious. I'm sure you've got a lot to say
I do.
about what's that?
Dude, you started out with saying how giddy you were, and now you're getting very serious very fast. I thought
Well,
we were
I
going to
mean,
have fun together. We always normally have such a good time, you and I.
but this is the kind of
Yep,
stuff that is not discussed at all in
yep,
corporate media,
yep.
and it's extremely important because for those of us who've had to deal with like borderline or narcissist person, like
Yeah.
I'll give you a little bit even more backstory.
Oh boy.
When I Michael Alec, who was the club kid killer, some of you guys know, he was one that he had the club kids and he murdered someone, went to jail. I found a painting of his in a thrift store in Soho in Manhattan, and I noticed it because the signature said M. Alec, and I thought it said Malice for a second.
Oh
And then
wow.
I wrote to him and I visited him in jail. And what people don't appreciate is we might read something like the DSM-4, like, oh, maybe I'm, a sociopath because I didn't care when I broke up with this girl. And then you meet an actual sociopath and you're like, oh, no, 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 no. This isn't a thin line.
Yeah.
It's like if I like to drink and I'm an alcoholic, it's not
Right.
like a thin difference. It is a fundamental major difference. And when you
Yeah.
meet someone like this, you're like, it's chilling. A, on the kind of caveman brain, but also in the logical brain, you're like, I'm talking to effectively a Martian who looks like me, he eats like me, goes to the bathroom, but it's effectively a different species of animal. I would love to hear your thoughts and your experiences on
All
this.
right, we're going to go down a big rabbit hole here, but I just
Please.
want to say I watched some of your Jordan Peterson interview and your comments about Aristotle versus Plato. I want to come back to that at some point. Okay, promise me
Sure.
we'll get there. Okay,
Sure.
because you guys didn't talk about post structuralism, and I want to condemn that in no uncertain terms
Okay.
clearly on your show. But so all right, so you are walking into a very complicated territory. I wrote a book on this 20 years ago. I will tell you the reason I wrote the book is I had a friend who was sort of interested in celebrity as a sort of object for study. And I knew lots of celebrities. I've met them every night on the radio station and stuff. And much as you opened this conversation and said, they're all kind of, there's a thing going, something's going on. And I said, yeah. I said, well, first thing you have to know is that they're narcissistic. They have personality traits. Now let's quickly take an aside here and say that you are putting your finger on the difference between personality traits and personality disorders, right? So there is a line that you cross where you have a diagnosable disorder. It affects, you have the disorder because it affects your functioning socially, primarily with other people, whether it's at work or in intimate relations, whatever it might be. You're either exploitative or you're whatever it is. You have
Yeah.
trouble functioning socially, and that's when you get functioning is where you get the evidence of a disorder. Traits are all over the place. That's why we can look at the DSM-5 and go, "Hey, that's
Yeah.
me. I have some of that." Yeah, and we do. We all do have some of that. But back to the celebrity and the disorders, I had a hunch that there was something a little more going on there. And I also had a hunch that being a celebrity, becoming a celebrity had some meaning to it of some type. And so I also hearken back to my experience. This is going to be like a soliloquy, my friend. So hang
Please.
on. If you want to take notes and ask follow-up questions, please do. And let me also say that have you ever heard of the uncanny valley?
Of course. Well, I'm gonna tell everyone a spoiler, okay?
Yeah.
So, and don't tweet this at him. I already have it planned that when I'm on Rogan with Lex,
Uh,
me and Joe are gonna be dressed like robots, and I'm not gonna do like a robot. I'm gonna do like an uncanny valley mannequin, and I figured out the makeup I'm gonna
perfect.
have to do, and it's gonna be the creepiest shit ever.
I love it.
So for those who don't know, let me explain. Uncanny valley is that when mannequins start to look too much like people, there's this little window where instead of it looking good, it looks creepy because on some level you're picking up this isn't human and it freaks you out.
And I'm of the opinion that that is an evolutionary mechanism designed to, it actually underlying it is sort of disgust and fear. And it's a way of causing us to pull away from something infected so we don't get infected, or something dangerous who doesn't, like you said, a sociopath that doesn't work like my brain. I should naturally want to pull away from that because that could be kind of dangerous. So I'm of the opinion that the uncanny valley it's in the robot literature, but it really should be in the human
Yeah.
evolutionary literature as an interpersonal thing. And we definitely do that. In fact, it's something we have to get over in terms of our stigmatization of mental illness. We really need to get down. And by the way, it was on full display during COVID when there was clean and unclean and
Yeah.
signaling, and I just effing ridiculous. Okay, so that's Uncanny Valley. My preamble story to the book I wrote. So I worked in a psychiatric hospital for like 35 years. When I first got there in the early 80s, there's an admission sheet that everybody fills out, and you put the primary psychiatric diagnoses, and then you secondarily used to put sometimes we still do, their personality diagnoses, possible, not possible borderline, or probable borderline, or actually borderline, diagnosed borderline. And when I got there were all kinds of different personalities in that box. There was dependent, there was OCD. It was all kinds of all the stuff on that you see in the DSM-5. They all showed up on the diagnostic box. I noticed towards the end of the 80s, I started seeing a lot of borderline, almost always. And then by the 90s, exclusively cluster B personality. And the cluster B is the narcissistic disorders: narcissism, sociopath, borderline, and histrionic. I didn't see much histrionic, but who knew hiding in the wings was hysteria anyway. We saw it again, full display with COVID and Trump derangement and all these things where people became hysterical. I did not see evidence of that. I would not have predicted that, but the evidence now is clear that it was lurking in the background. So exclusively narcissistic disorders. So that's primarily what we've seen. It made sense to me because I was seeing a pandemic of childhood trauma
Yeah.
and interpersonal trauma perpetrated often by the people who you were supposed to be relying on for your safety and well-being. There was all kinds of chaos in families. There was drug use in families. There was sexual abuse, physical abuse, neglect. It was just a mess. And it went on for a good 20 years. So I knew there would be a massive trend of cluster B disorders, and lo and behold, there it came. And so what we did was we put together a research protocol. I said, look, I have celebrities in the radio studio every night, How about we give them a basic personality inventory, and
Ooh.
we'll do that, and then we'll do as our control. My partner, Dr. Young, was a business school professor, and he was really good with mathematics and modeling and things. And we'll do the business school, your business school students as our control. Well, the business school students were higher than average. They were above control for the country as the what's called the narcissistic inventory suggested. Then we tested all the celebrities, and they were way up. They were way off the chart. And then he was able to put together a model that showed that the celebrity itself, that becoming a celebrity was a bid to manage the narcissistic impulses, which makes sense, right? I mean, narcissism is a deep feeling of being small and empty and insignificant that you buttress against by making a big self that you use the environment to feed. The problem is that's a pseudo self, it's not a real self, and it requires constant feeding from the environment, and celebrity is that bid. And I noticed that not only were they doing that, but the thought of losing celebrity was so threatening to them. Oh my God! People, the celebrity press wants you to believe that being a celebrity is so difficult. It is. That's ridiculous. I mean, maybe like somebody that can't move around, Taylor Swift or something. It's hard, but it's not. It's better. You get better seats at the restaurant. People are nice.
Wait, hold on. But it's difficult in the sense you just said because you have this constant panic that this is all gonna go away tomorrow because it came
That's the
overnight.
bad part.
Yes.
That's the part that they freak out about. Not that the being the celebrity is bad. It's that I'm going to lose it or I'm going to get old and lose it, which is now you're starting to see some of them get into that. And it's rough, man. It is a rough thing. If you're not connected to your primary affect, if you don't have spontaneous sense of who you are. So I saw all that trauma. I saw this stuff. And in the book called The Mirror Effect, I wanted to put in a chapter on pre-revolutionary France because I looked around and I could not find any period of history that had so much childhood trauma and so much narcissism, except pre-revolutionary France looked exactly right for me. And I said, look, I want to write this. I think it fits, and I want to predict. It's speculative, but it seems to me we're going to see scapegoating and guillotines. I don't know what I'm describing, but something's going to come. And I didn't know about cancellation. I didn't know about COVID. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
early 2000s or mid 2000s or something. We wrote this thing, or maybe 2010, and lo and behold, the guillotines came, and here we are. Now the problem, if you want to be a student of history, is please everybody, if you put somebody on the guillotine, there's a mathematical certainty that eventually somebody's going to put you on the guillotine.
Right.
It doesn't stop until everybody's on the guillotine or somebody says enough.
So let me
And
jump in here. So that's really
Go ahead.
interesting because I have Robespierre's autograph framed in my kitchen as we speak.
Well, so okay, so so Saint Just and the Italian and all these people, these fucking maniacs from that period, I've been studying the crap out of lately.
Yeah.
I became obsessed. I'm pretty good at speaking French, and I've started listening to academic lectures in French about that period.
No one likes to show off.
But I've noted my ability to produce language is not where I want it yet. Trust me, but I can understand pretty much everything, and I'm enraptured with how they are struggling with trying to come to terms with their history
Yeah.
and who are they? Who are the French? Because they're losing it, and they're the young people there. It's the young people that are picking up the crucible and saying, wait a minute. First of all, liberty. You can't make us take a vaccine that you tell us we don't need and we're going to be okay with this virus anyway because you're young. You're going to force us to do so. That is not a founding principle of this country. And oh, by the way, let's take another look at Napoleon. Let's take another look at Robespierre. And by the way, they say it when they say Robespierre in French, they say it in 3 syllables always. Robespierre. Robespierre. I almost can't do it. Robespierre. It's so funny. But anyway, you tell me your thoughts.
Well, no, it's really kind of eerie that you're bringing this up because I want to, we all have these flashbulb memories when something just clicks in your head and you kind of like, it's just like you can't go back to your thoughts before that. I was at the gym shortly after they reopened COVID, right? And I'm on the treadmill and there are the TV screens on top, and there's a commercial for either Good Morning America or Today Show. And everyone has these, and people's businesses they've had for decades. Family businesses are being destroyed. Kids can't go to school. People are in a state of terror. If you don't get vaccinated, you're going to kill grandma. And on this commercial, everyone has these rictus grins like the Joker, and they're like playing musical chairs or something and running around and like having a ball at 7 in the morning. And I thought to myself, this is how the French Revolution happened. When you have this completely saccharine, artificial, disconnected class telling everyone we're having so much fun at 7 in the morning with absolutely no concern or even acknowledgement that anyone is suffering or struggling, even in the sake of, look, we know you're suffering now, but this we have to get through this because it's going to be better later. Just we're all in this, like FDR, like, come on, we got to stick through this. We all he wasn't suffering too much, but the idea was we got to all stick together because this
Yeah.
sucks. And
Yeah.
I'm like, this is how it happened.
And then the elites, whom you're describing, are driving wedges wherever they can on
Yes.
top of that. You're good, you're bad, you're a colonist, and they are imbuing goodness in certain people and badness in others. You're bad if you're this, you're good if you're that. Listen, I have started reading deeply on because of you. I started reading Lenin's biographies
Oh
and
yeah.
went deep down that hole. Um, and I saw Mark Andreessen talking about it. I went, I got to read that, and I started reading that, and then I went further in with the sans culotte and what the nonsense that they brought. By the way, I'm no the French are starting to write excuses for Robespierre. I no, not me. I don't
Uh,
know about you, but I don't. Yeah,
he is a interesting figure in like a novel. He is an archetype. He
yeah,
is a true believer.
yep.
They called him the incorruptible for a reason. Um,
Smart, super
yeah,
smart.
there's a lot to unpack in him. Not that he's a
Mhm.
good person, but he's a very intriguing person.
But all of this goes back to what you said about Aristotle versus Plato.
Wait,
As soon
wait, hold on. I'm
because
just gonna say one more thing before we
go
get
ahead,
to
go ahead.
Aristotle.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
said this on Rogan. I'm gonna say it to you, and something I'm
Mhm.
extremely concerned about in this country is violence. Because
Yeah.
as you said, violence sings its own songs. Once you start it,
Yes.
it's not gonna end where you want it.
No.
And I
No.
said on Rogan, I said, when the middle class starts putting up guillotines, the corporate journalists are gonna be tripping over themselves to laugh at how dull the blades are. And it's like these people are so disconnected with what's happening and their role and what they're fomenting, and it's only getting worse, and they think it's funny, and they think January 6th is as bad as it gets, and I'm like, "You people graduated college. You should have some vague 101 vision of history of
No. They
what
don't.
happens," but they don't.
They don't. I don't know because they were so busy rewriting the historical record that we are living
Yeah,
that
yeah.
they missed the actual historical record of Europe and what went down and what we could learn from it. They missed it. It's or they were too wrapped up in the more recent history, which frankly is not a good lesson. I would argue of what we're heading into here. This is something that happens every long cycles, long cycle, but they happen. I thought they didn't happen anymore. I thought they were over.
Oh, no.
I used to, you made me think hard about Civil War and that kind of stuff.
Well, it's not only
Just
that, it's that if you I don't know if you're I had to argue with my editor about this, and he was obviously not a very impressive person because he was an editor and not an author, that before World War One, that window, there was this belief that now that we have technology and now that we're civilized,
yeah,
war is done. We're not gonna have
yes,
wars anymore. They
I
really
know.
believe
After
this.
World War One,
And then
yes,
World
I
War
know.
One happens.
And with the other thing that people don't know about World War One, there was tremendous people have this sort of glib way of today going, well, if we just are all doing business together and sharing things, and it's like, no, World War One, there was massive business relationships amongst
Yes.
all these countries.
And cultural
It was like,
exchange.
and cultures, it was on, and then it just fell apart literally overnight.
Yeah. Well,
And by the way, it only took a couple of shithead figures. I don't know how you feel about me cussing here a little bit, but
no, please.
there were some crappy figures in the mix, and you only need one or two of them to really get things roaring.
Folks, I want to talk to you about HelloFresh. Each HelloFresh box is packed with farm fresh ingredients, and everything arrives pre portioned right to your doorstep for less hassle and less wasted food. HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. So you resolve to actually sit down and eat dinner around the table. What do you do about it? Simple. You turn to HelloFresh's lineup of quick and easy meals, including their 15-minute recipes designed to help minimize mealtime stress. So HelloFresh is a different company from some of the others, and they were very smart. They send me some of their products. So they will send you like fresh tomatoes and fresh scallions. And all the portions are pre-packed. So putting it together for a fresh meal is really easy and really good. It's not all frozen, like nuke it and then it's a TV dinner. It's an actual meal that you can prepare. And if I could do it, you can do it. So they're really kind of special. And I'm really glad that they sent me their product so I could enjoy it and see how simple it was to use. All you have to do is go to hellofresh.com/you're welcome free, YOUR, and use code you're welcome free for free breakfast for life. That means one breakfast item per box while subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life at hellofresh.com/you're welcome free with code you're welcome free. Have people over for dinner and you're going to look like a chef because you cooked a meal, but they made it easy for you. And you'll be thanking me and I'll be saying you're welcome. Let's get back to the show. So let's talk about Plato versus Aristotle. I'm curious to hear. That
Hang on,
was your
one
takeaway.
before you
Okay.
do,
Yes, sir.
where these guillotines I'm worried are gonna come from. I lately have been having some conversations with people who want to go after the perpetrators of the lockdowns and the mandates and the masks and all this stuff. And I keep saying, look, I'm not saying amnesty per se. I'm being called some sort of amnesty advocate. I'm saying you should be, especially teenagers should be furious. They should be so angry. Be angry. Go become politically active. Make change. Be angry. Let it motivate you. But vote out the rogues that you're so pissed at. Go get into government. Democracy has to be practiced. But if we're going to go after, if you, not me, if you're going to go after criminally or civilly for that matter, but especially criminally, people who perpetrated this thing, two things are going to happen. A, you're never going to find out what actually happened. The important thing is figuring out what happened and putting things in place to make sure it doesn't happen again. But if you start going after people criminally, they're going to become defensive, they're going to hide, and you're never going to see the truth. It's going to be obfuscated forever.
I
And
think
two, go ahead.
I think for many people, vengeance is more important than truth, and they're not
Well,
always wrong.
and I'm saying if we're going to stop this thing, we got to know what it was, look at it hard, and put things in place that make it not happen. And two,
Okay.
this is the guillotines again, and they're not going to stop with this. It's going to go, like you said, violence sings its own song. I don't know where it's going to go. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. Vengeance is a bad. It
But
doesn't look at history. It
so
doesn't
is
go with it.
democracy because rogues are the only people in the ballot
Right now. Maybe we can
ever.
get some ever.
You don't think sociopaths are enormously overrepresented and narcissists and
Yes,
politicians?
yes, they are. I
Okay.
didn't. You said only.
Yes, only at the high levels. Who would put themselves through what? Let's suppose you're a saint like a Mother Teresa is purported to be, and she's running for office. You don't think she and her family would be caricatured as demons within a week?
Yes, yes.
So why would I
I've
want to put
I've
myself through
thought
that?
very I've thought very hard about this. I've myself gone, oh my God, I got to do something. I got to do something. I got to do something. And so I think about it. My wife is the one that goes, no, she doesn't want to be put through this. But there's got to be people like me thinking about it. Like you get to the point where you have to do something. We have to get involved. This
Yeah,
is out
well,
of
getting
control.
involved doesn't mean making the system works. It could also mean just defeating the system.
Keep going.
I mean, that's all. I mean, this whole edifice is completely ridiculous. Democracy is an obscenity that we only consider as a hypothesis since we're trained to the contrary since middle school. The
So
idea,
what is our alternative? As you know, I adhere to as a Churchill. It's the worst form of government except for all the rest.
and that I hate that quote, and let's break this down because that implies that it's like saying the worst form of food except for all the rest. That implies human beings aren't meant to live on this earth. So if an animal exists or a species exists, there has to be an environment that is conducive toward its thriving. So there's no such thing as a worst. There's going to be something that is actually comports to that entity's values and what it needs to survive. And
So hold on.
democracy,
So
uh,
stop.
sure,
So Louis the 16th and his court thrived. They
but
were thriving.
but humanity wasn't thriving. It's just that's a small
Well,
subset at the expense of
so
everybody
now
else.
we're to a much more complicated territory, right? How do
It's
we create
no,
some
it's not complicated at
territory?
all. What's the difference between Louis the Third? What's the difference between Louis' court and the Senate in your mind? Theoretically, you can vote out people every 6 years?
Yeah, I understand what the point you're making, and I do believe there's a book called what's it called?
The
Can't remember right
Anarchist
now.
Handbook.
Yeah. Well, it makes the case that the entrenched elites are the problem in the evolution of cycles of society.
But they're inevitable.
Okay, keep going.
I mean, there's the idea of I think it's Pareto's the circulation of the elites. Democracy is one of the few theories that doesn't even make sense in practice, in theory. Sorry, because the purest example of democracy, which is a town hall, you're still going to have someone who's adjudicating the topics for debate and how long everyone can speak, and that person is an elite. You cannot have
Thus,
democratic rule.
that's why we have republic.
Yeah, but we don't have a republic.
I
It's
know.
not
Maybe we need.
practicable.
Why is that?
Because you are always going to have people who have vested interests who are going to have more access and more of an incentive to move the needle than the layman.
Some of that's okay, right?
Some of that is okay, but the point is, it's
Yeah.
still not this model that is put forward as ideal or even close to it.
So, what is your solution? Because I'm a
Anarchism is the solution. Freedom.
okay.
You can
Well, I'm
roll
not.
your listen. You can roll your eyes
I
all
know.
you want.
Listen, Michael, I'm not rolling my eyes because you've made me really think long and hard about this. So
Okay.
you're my like my favorite Martian. You're my favorite anarchist. so and so and I used to be much more simplistic in my view of this, but you've made me much more thoughtful and much more open. And so and I become much more late in life here, much to my shock. I feel like I'm a freedom fighter half the time. Like
Good.
you have to stand up in the name of liberty. I
Yes.
never imagined that was something that was in question.
You,
Now you literally have to take a position on it, which is the
But
most
you also
insane
never
thing.
imagined that people who, have a degree in English would be lecturing you that you don't understand medicine en masse.
En masse.
You don't know what you're talking about. Listen to
Uh,
Jill Biden, the real doctor.
well, okay, so this is my thing, okay, and maybe this is your thing too. The most efficient and effective units of social functioning are the smallest. Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. Doctor-patient relationship, family, husband, wife, however you conceive of that. Those are and that's the invisible hand, right? That's where the invisible hand works. Okay, what do you say?
That's not efficient. Efficiency is done at scale by definition.
Oh, not with human relations.
Absolute.
That
That's what you have a
now you
if
sound
we
like
have
Lenin.
if we have 100 people, right?
Don't even stop
You're
on that one.
you're doing your thing, I'm doing
Yeah.
my thing, Susan's doing her thing, the help is doing their own thing. That's much
Mhm.
more efficient than 2 people.
But the decisions are made with 2 people.
But
The
that's
I
not
this I
effectiveness, but
well,
yes.
so I get to see this writ large every day in medicine, where they're always putting things on top of the patient-physician relationship, and I'm just gonna tell you,
I agree with
in
you.
every and this may be the wrong model, okay, but I'm gonna tell you that for sure, every single thing, everything they put onto that relationship, it becomes less effective and less efficient.
I'm not disagreeing. You're exactly correct.
Okay,
Decision making should be as localized as possible, if only
okay,
because that's where the knowledge is.
okay,
Einstein or the smartest person who ever lived is not in a position to tell a completely illiterate, uneducated farmer how to run his farm because that farmer's been there all his life and he knows his land better than the most brilliant person who's ever lived. I'm not
correct.
disagreeing with that. I'm just talking about in terms of
Okay,
efficiency as opposed to effectiveness. It's more efficient when things are done at scale. That
okay,
doesn't
keep going.
justify
How does
bureaucracy at
that so
all.
how do we are okay, so
That's all I'm
what
saying.
do we okay, so we need to so there needs to be a collective, but the collective
It's
needs
not a
to be
collective. It's just a relationship between, and it's dynamic. So you and I are talking, but you have different relationship with your wife, and you have different relationship with her while you're on the show. And I have a relationship with my producer, and I have a different relationship when we're at dinner, and so on and so forth. So these are dynamic. The fact that these relationships have to be dynamic and they're like Venn diagrams is why any kind of top-down bureaucracy is going to be counterproductive in the main.
so what do we do? What's the, see, because now it starts to sound more like a republic again. So what is it?
A republic is still top-down.
From who's the top?
The federal government.
And who's in there?
Bad people. Cluster
No, no, no.
B.
Wait, I want to go back to the efficiency part. How do
Sure.
we make it more efficient? How do we do that? What's your model?
The invisible hand is what you were just talking about. That's what makes it efficient. It's when you
Okay.
have it's a good thing that us Starbucks exists because everyone can get coffee that's identical wherever they go at a certain
Yes.
set price.
Okay.
But that's not one-on-one. That's a huge organization.
But I'm conceding to you a certain amount of this. So keep going. I just want to know what the model is. What does it look
That is
like?
the model. The model is, people voluntarily associate insofar as it is advantageous to both parties, and through
Mhm.
this, you construct these amazing edifices that leave everyone better off.
So it
And
kind of
when you
sounds like,
interpose force,
yeah.
that's when things become counterproductive and often nefarious.
Okay. So it sort of sounds like I'm trying to think of a good word for this, almost like an industrial model, like I think of the Germans, the pre World War II.
It's
They
the
had a lot of
opposite of
this
the
stuff.
Germans because the Germans
They-
are very rigid and fixed. Whereas with this, I
uh,
can be a Starbucks customer right now. Then I go to the supermarket. Then I do this show. Then I go to
yeah,
the
but if
movies.
but I'm thinking about the people in the Starbucks system. They do it a certain way. They produce it a certain way. They have a certain barrister there, and the people above them are short. It's a bureaucracy again. Here we go. But you pancake it as much as you can, right? You make it as much like UPS as possible, where every individual is following a bunch of efficiency standards, but they're their own boss, right?
And if they're not, that's a great opportunity for some other company to come in, and now they're going to, provide a better either service or product or compete that way.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yes.
It just sounds like business. It's
It
like business, it's just business.
but it's not business because often business in America means calling the lobbyists and
Well,
having cost of
because
entry be very
because
high.
because the government is encumbering the business in so many ways, and you're trying to get them out of the way.
But they're doing it at the behest of other businesses.
They're the because the other businesses have the lobbyists that pay them.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
Starbucks. I wanna make it as hard as possible for you to compete with me. So I'm gonna have these environmental rules or these labor
So
rules that I know I can
so
meet.
I don't want to accuse you of things, but I'm gonna just to tell you the things that
Am
pop
I
in my
accusing
head.
me?
I know better than to accuse you of stuff. And by the way, while I'm thinking of it, in terms of Lex and the uncanny valley,
Yeah.
just as an aside here, that cake you guys cut of his head,
Oh, yeah.
I thought, oh, I have the uncanny valley response to that cake and Lex. I have the, both are the same to me.
That cake is in the face is in my kitchen right now in a
It's
cake dish.
it's so good. It was
Yeah.
so, but the fact that the cake was lifelike enough
Oh,
that it
yeah.
triggered the uncanny valley, that I thought, well, that's what Malice is always saying about Lex.
Yes.
He triggers the uncanny valley. He's a
Yes.
robot.
Yes, very much so.
It's so funny. I love him, by the way.
Oh, I love
I
yeah.
just, oh my god. Um, so I was going to accuse you of something, and now thankfully oh, what you're describing sounds like Reaganomics a little bit.
Folks, gold has soared past $2,000 an ounce. The wars in Israel and Ukraine, as well as rate cuts that are on the table, are fueling gold's meteoric rise. Deutsche Bank, UBS, Bank of America, JP Morgan, they're all forecasting sizable rate cuts in an election year. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, Larry Fink of BlackRock, they point out similarities to the 70s. In 1979, we had the Iran hostage crisis, war in the Middle East, and major cities in disarray and stagflation. Gold went from $158 an ounce in 74 to $850 an ounce in 1980. Meanwhile, our national debt is skyrocketing ever higher. There's a direct correlation to the national debt and the price of gold. In 2020, the U.S. debt was $23 trillion and gold was $1,500 an ounce. In 2023, the national debt is $33 trillion and gold is over $2,000 an ounce. Donald Trump warned that the U.S. dollar is no longer being the world standard, and that will be our greatest defeat in 200 years. So here's what you can do. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Mention my name. That's Michael Malice. And you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots, protecting Patriots. Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver, and you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA on qualifying rollovers. All you have to do is call 888-505-9845 to get a free investor guide today, or even easier, just go to malicegold.com. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer 7 years in a row. So just call 505-9845 or go to malicegold.com. Protect your money against the Fed and inflation. Let's get back to the show. Reaganomics was heavily the government spending went through the roof under Reagan.
Right, but the Reaganomics itself was about getting government out of everything.
Yeah, government should be out of everything, yes.
Yeah.
But I don't think Reagan
So
really did
so
that.
he didn't. And you know, remember his what the 6 scariest words in the English language
I'm from the
English?
government, I'm here to help.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I have never felt more I didn't know I was around during the Reagan era. I didn't appreciate that phrase with the vividness that I do now. Now it's like so meaningful to me.
And
And then I keep thinking, well, maybe this is libertarianism.
libertarianism is anarchism without testosterone. Um, and as bad as you're with the chills are going up your spine, imagine if you were a Canadian.
Oh my God. Can you I
I
mean,
can't
it's
imagine.
just I sent a video out, a TikTok that this woman did that was really very funny, making fun of Canadians, like, "Hi, I'm a Canadian. I can do this, but I can't do that," and making fun of all the ridiculous, limitations they have. And people from Canada attacked me, like, "It's not so bad. This is how we wanna be," and I thought, "Oh, they're totally brainwashed." And so the other thing that I've spent my time doing is reading about persuasion and brainwashing.
Wait, can I ask you a
She
question though? Because there's this
Yeah.
great quote from H.L. Mencken, whose photo is over my desk, signed
Mhm.
photo, early newspaperman from the early 20th century. And he had said, the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. So I don't think they're brainwashed at all. I think they're getting what they want.
I'm gonna think on that.
Yeah.
I don't have a good response to it right now, but my I have a positive bias, right? I don't know if are you positively biased or negatively biased? Can
What,
you tell?
what do you mean by those terms?
I just keep thinking things are gonna work out, things are for the good,
I
things are
am
better.
hopeful, but I'm not of the belief that human beings universally work the same way. And I think that's a very big thing
Oh,
for people to appreciate.
yes, and so I wanna go back to your story about the guy that you visited in prison.
But let me just say one more thing also, and I think
Yeah,
you'd agree. There's a
yeah.
lot of people who, if they had their druthers, would wanna go back to the COVID era.
There are people, I don't think there are a lot,
Okay, we disagree.
okay? I would love to see those numbers because if there are a lot, that would scare the living shit out of
I
me.
think there's a lot.
Well, I think the ones that would like it are signaling it. They would still wear masks.
Sure,
They still and they wear them outside. They wear them in nonsensical
but
situations
that's in-group
and
signaling, yeah.
nonsensical styles of masks fitting nonsensically.
But it's
So
not
they are wearing it.
nonsensical.
They're wearing a talisman. They're
Yes.
signaling.
Yes, that serves a purpose.
I understand, but from a standpoint of infectious disease, it's
Sure.
no function. So the one thing that you learn early when you're inundated with people whose brains are like the ones you were describing, the guy with the personality disorder, i.e., working in a psychiatric hospital, which, as I said, I did for many years. The one, and I heard a lecture once that sort of brought this to the fore for me. And I wish I could remember, might have been Peter Fonagy, somebody like that. And the one caveat you must keep in mind when you're working with psychiatric patients is do not assume other people's minds and brains work like yours. They don't. Do not assume that. They are very different. And on the heels of that, I had to cultivate the word whatever, which really meant expect anything, be flexible in response to anything, be resilient, whatever, expect anything, whatever. People do what they do, whatever. Not the way my mind works, thank God, but for the grace of God. But for the grace of God, what are you doing?
I'm
You're,
all
you're,
blurry and I'm trying to fix it and I didn't work. So now
you're,
it's all
you're
screwed up and you can see what a
I
mess my
liked
room
you
is. Don't tell
closer up.
Jordan.
You're better closer.
I don't
Um,
think that's true at all.
do you
There we
think,
go.
given that safety and given that propaganda works, and I'm obsessing about all that these days, and I hate it. I hate it. Um, do you think we need a rebirth of something like religion to help with this?
Um,
Speaking of human
I
thriving,
don't know what help means in this context. I mean, if
thriving, thriving. Humans thrive with religion. They do.
I'm not certainly opposed to religion at all, and I know personally several people who, after becoming more religious, I would indisputably say that their lives are better off and that they're better people.
Yep. And I will
Um,
tell you, I may just finish by saying, and I deal with the end of life all the time, and trust me, religious people deal with it much. I'm jealous. They deal with it so much better.
yeah. But to your point earlier, I think a lot of people are. One of the things about Christianity is you're not converted, it's the Holy Spirit that converts you. You need that leap of faith, right?
Mhm, mhm,
So,
mm,
when religion becomes popular, there are the people who have had that conversion moment, who accept
mm,
their faith, who try to live a righteous life, and then there's
mhm,
the people who are on the bandwagon. And if you talk to
mhm.
any Christian, I have many Christian listeners, they will be happy to tell me off the air probably that the people in their church who go to church every week, but who not do not lead godly lives at all, but be the first to tell you how good of a people they are. So I am for an increase of morality, and I think religion is a way to get to there. But my concern is, are the people going to be acting in a certain way because they believe it, or are they just going to be going along to get along? And then you get someone come who takes this in a negative direction, and things get ugly very quickly, like the Taliban, for example,
So I can tell you, I deal with this all the time in 12-step recovery,
which is
where I
great.
see exact.
I love
Yeah,
12 step.
me too. And where I see exactly what you're talking about. Some people have these spiritual moments and they are fully in and everything's kind of easy because it motivates. They are just done and they move it forward and they get tremendous benefit from it. And there are people there just going through the motions.
Yeah,
I don't care. Just I don't care. I need you to not drink so you don't kill yourself. And so they are better when they're going through the motions. Are they perfect? Are they as good as the guys who have the spiritual connection? No. And are they at risk of relapse? Yeah. And do they slip and slide and do things that are kind of shitty oftentimes? Yeah. But they're way better than when they're not
yeah.
trying to be
The
better and
religions are
fall.
very good at hating the outgroup. 12 step is very much on fixing yourself and what is my role in all this? Do the next right
Yeah.
thing, keep my side of the street clean. When you have
Yep.
things organized, it very can, again, with politicians who will leverage this into nefarious directions, and that's my concern. I regard
And
progressivism as a barely disguised secular religion.
Well, we saw it in COVID.
Yes,
You were unclean, or you were clean, or you were in, or you were out.
right.
It was the most clear example of this I've ever seen. It was. I thought, oh my God, I guess we need religion to manage those
But that
impulses.
was a
In a,
religion.
it was a religion. I agree with
No,
you.
Rachel
We need something
Maddow
that
is
we.
literally a televangelist. Just because they don't invoke God does not make it any less of a faith. So if you're saying we want more religion, you want more of that? I don't know if that's
I want something to replace it that has at least goodness at its heart and the golden rule right next door.
sure.
The golden rule has been eviscerated, and it'd be as simple as bringing that back would help us a
I
lot.
don't believe in the golden rule at all
Oh, dude, how come?
because I am not going to I think it's in I had a friend named Marcia. She ran something called cuddle parties. And it sounds ridiculous. Then you talk to them and you're like, oh, this is actually a good idea. The point of cuddle parties where people need human contact and this is a good idea, you get together and you physically touch each other. And I asked her, like, what happens when things get creepy? And she goes, people will take as much space as they give you. Everyone has to define and set their own boundaries. The problem with the golden rule is if I'm the kind of guy who is comfortable that, you know what, you and I have a big argument, we're going to go outside and have it out. So I'm fine getting punched in the face or throwing a punch because that's how I settle disputes. That's the golden rule. The golden rule is I'm going to
I
be,
don't have a big problem with that, by the
what's
way.
that?
I think maybe more of that.
You,
Maybe I don't I don't want people to use guns. I mean, that's not, that's a golden rule too. I agree with you,
I
but
don't think it's a good idea for people to feel comfortable if they are offended to punch somebody else in the face because
that's not the golden rule though,
that is the
because
golden
I don't.
rule.
No, that's one side saying I want to punch you for it, and the other saying I
No,
just
you
no, I
do
don't
unto
want to do that.
others as you would have them do unto you. If I'm being a loudmouth in this model, I'm fine with someone punching me in the face and shutting me up. Therefore, if you're being a loudmouth, I have the space to do that to you.
Okay,
That's the golden
I,
rule. The golden rule is also if I
It's a little bit of the prisoner's dilemma. There's a little bit of there's a little
there is a
game theory in it.
yes,
Yeah, because the other side of it is I'm okay being a loudmouth. I'm not okay being punched in the mouth.
right.
Therefore, you can be a loudmouth also, but you cannot throw a punch.
Sometime in the early 80s, REO Speedwagon's airplane made an unannounced, middle-of-the-night landing.
This is my friend Kyle MacLachlan, the star of Twin Peaks. And he's telling me about how he discovered a real-life Twin Peaks in rural North Carolina, not far from where he filmed Blue Velvet.
What was on the plane was copious amounts of drugs coming in from South America. Supposedly, Pablo Escobar went looking for other spots, quiet, out-of-the-way places to bring in his cocaine.
My name is Joshua Davis, and I'm an investigative reporter. Kyle and I talk all the time about the strange things we come across, but nothing was quite as strange as what we found in Varnamtown, North Carolina.
There's crooked cops, brother against brother. Everyone's got a story to tell, but does the truth even exist? Welcome to Varnamtown.
Varnamtown is available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Let's get back to the show. But I see this all the time on social media when I'm a complete douchebag on Twitter.
You?
Yes, and when
What? Malice? No
Dr. Drew,
way.
they told me to just be myself, and I listened. So, but then when people come at me and I block them, they're shocked. It's like
Yeah.
you don't get to talk to me the way I talk to you. We're not peers.
That's a different issue. All right.
That's the
we're
golden
going down a
rule.
rabbit. We're not peers is
Do
now
unto
you're
others.
building your own elite.
Yes,
Well, I don't like elites.
it's an in-group. I treat my friends
I
and
don't like
family
in-groups. I
different.
don't like clubs.
Hold
I don't
on.
like clubs.
Bullshit.
I like Groucho Marx. I would never be a member of a club that would have me as a member.
You treat your friends and family different than you treat randos on the street. Not in a nefarious way, but you're gonna give them gifts. You're gonna be more
Yes.
concerned about their health. That
Yes.
violates the golden rule.
I don't want the brandos on the street to treat me like a family member.
Correct.
So I treat them like they treat me.
That's your elite.
Golden rule.
That's your elite. You're in group.
Well, now you're back to my we were just arguing semantics here,
It's
but
not
now we're back to my
semantics.
small unit stuff, which is what I was saying, that's how this stuff should be managed on a
Correct.
small unit.
Correct.
So we're kind of ending in the same place. But there's one thing here that has slipped in and out of our conversation that I want to bring to the fore. And that is the phenomenon of scapegoating.
Sure.
Scapegoating is an extremely powerful human phenomenon that nobody talks about. And in my chapter that I never got to write, that was what I wanted to focus on, was that people with cluster B disorders have so much unregulated aggression that they will act out on each other or form a mob and focus it on one scapegoat. And one of the things that mitigated that through history was this one guy died for us. And now we're going to drink his blood and eat his body. But that guy did it. That guy died. We don't need to kill anybody else because that guy died for us. That was somewhat of a scapegoating focus, right? Jesus died for us.
Well, he was literally the scapegoat. I mean, the scapegoat was the goat that was killed, and then Christ replaced that with himself.
And so it was serving to create cohesion without mob. But then that started unraveling, and now we have more narcissism, and we have ungodly behavior in the family systems during the 70s and 80s, and now we have cluster B disorders, and we have scapegoating on a huge scale. You know who was the ultimate scapegoating society? There was one that took
the New Deal.
Huh? No, it was a society that had something called the Codex, which was how to abuse systematically your children to turn them into great warriors.
Oh, the Spartans?
And they were, no, the Aztecs.
Oh.
And so they had to scapegoat somebody every morning in order to prevent these physically abused warriors that were so violent from killing each other. They focused that aggression on one person on top of the temple every day who got his heart torn out.
Well, let's go back to, I want to make sure we get in that Plato versus Aristotle thing you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. Well, we're talking around it, and I'll just state my sort of position, which is I see some of that, a lot of that, although Plato was an injunction against relying too much on our logic and brain. Uh, Ultimately, it was ideology versus science, frankly, versus evidence. And wherever you find ideology taking hold in human systems, you find unbelievably massive harm to human beings. And we are in an ideological freaking stronghold these days. And it is, and that's where um, persuasion and propaganda has me freaked out,
I think it's
because they're building that ideology as though it's fact, as though it's an Aristotelian observable phenomenon.
I think it's the Sistine Chapel where it's Aristotle and Plato are walking, and Aristotle's pointing to the earth,
It's
and
it's
Plato's
it's
pointing to
uh
the
it's
heavens.
no, it's the School of
That,
Athens.
yeah,
The
yeah, that's
School of
right.
Athens,
Yes,
one of the back studies behind the Sistine Chapel. And it's this
yeah.
versus the mean
And
versus the
what
golden.
people don't understand, and I there's a 9-volume history of philosophy I read in college by Copleston, and volume 7 is the one you want because that's the German philosophy and that's the German idealists. And people think of idealism, think of JFK, someone who thinks of a great vision. Idealists, and again, it's you can't wrap your head around it because it sounds so crazy. They believe that ideas are more real than reality, meaning this.
So I was studying Bishop Barclay,
Oh
who was
yeah,
sort of one of the big
I
advocates of
refuted
that.
thus. Yeah,
Yeah, and I had a professor that said, "Stop using the word idealism. It's screwing us up. It's ideaism.
yeah,
It's ideaism, really, is what it is." And I thought, "Oh, that just made it all clear for me." Okay, but by the same token, you get to the deist and Kant and whatnot, and there's some. I try to live my life, per like his first principle, right? I think that's not a bad thing. Is essentially live your life as though it's the modern version of it would be live your life as though there's a video camera running at all times that people can judge your actions. And guess what, everybody? There pretty much is. That's pretty much what's
yes.
happening right now.
Well,
So you might as well behave accordingly.
I always say be hard on yourself, but be kind to yourself.
Mm.
But
Mm,
the ideal, getting back to it, it's when you hear when people say that, Dr. Oz is a rhino. He's a Republican in name only. He's not a real Republican. Who are the real Republicans? All the senators and all the congressmen, or whoever you have in your head. So that's a great example of idealism, as you call it, idealism, where the idea is more real than literally the flesh and blood people who populate this party. But I think this is such this Aristotle. There's a great book called The Cave in the Light by Arthur Herman, who I've had on the show many times. Superb thinker and author, and he traces the history of Platonism versus Aristotle up until I think the 20th century, and it's just an absolute masterpiece. And how insidious, and you can't have Robespierre, you can't have Lenin, you can't have Hitler unless you're comfortable saying that my vision is more real than the flesh and blood people who inhabit this earth.
right. It's scientific materialism versus sort of deductive or inductive reasoning or something. It's just something completely you and it's the problem is that the logic behind it is self-reinforcing. It's like,
Yes,
and Lenin was way down that road. It's like, how can you tell me this phenomenon I know that is read your Marx, read your Engels. He's telling you what the future is there, and you're saying it's not so, but it's never been so. So how can you say it's not so? So we're going to do it,
and
and then now it didn't work, and now they're saying, well, you didn't do it right.
no, no,
I mean,
no.
this is just
Hold on, no, no,
so
no, it's not,
crazy.
that's not it. I talk about this extensively in the White Pill. It didn't work, therefore there are wreckers. Therefore, there are people who are sabotaging it
Yeah,
intentionally.
right.
And the
Yeah,
more we kill and try to ferret it out, that means the ones who are left are the ones who are really good at hiding.
now let history be your teacher from there. Now you get Robespierre and Saint Just, you get those two, and then you get Napoleon.
Yes.
That's what you get. That's the progression of human societies. That's how it works. It's been that way a million times. It's what the founding fathers were afraid of. They saw it as a possibility.
Yes.
They lived it out 20 years later in France.
Folks, I encourage you to go to malice.locals.com where Dr. Drew will be taking questions from supporters. Really, my last question I wanted to ask you is something I've been making a point of discussing, and I'm obviously not a trained shrink in any way, is there's almost no talk of the effects of hormones on psychology. And it's trans discourse is such a big thing, but no one talks about, or very few, from what I've seen, the effects of even males taking testosterone or females taking estrogen.
Yes.
Do you agree that
Yes.
this is like a huge piece that's missing of this whole puzzle?
Well, there are probably 30 topics adjacent to that,
Yes.
including hormones in food,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And what that's doing, and hormones from plastics, and what's that doing? There's a great book called Estrogenation, that addresses this issue. You ought to interview that guy too. A very good interview. And the writers and scientists that are concerned about this is, I'm not taking a position, I'm telling you their
Yeah.
concern about females that make a transition to girls that go to boys. Their moods improve instantly because testosterone is an extremely powerful antidepressant, extremely powerful initially. Doesn't work so well long term, and it can have other downstream effects, but initially it can be a very powerful antidepressant. And they're worried that that kind of thing is not being taken into the assessment of what's going on with some of these patients. So that kind of thing, absolutely. Or hormones late in life. I'll tell you Susan's story. Susan didn't feel right. By the way, she was treated like an incubator during our fertility campaign. God knows what the long-term effects of that are on her hormonal system. They put her on antidepressants. They told her to see a therapist. She was like, something's wrong. Finally, she got on hormone replacement and testosterone, appropriate for replacement. Instantly felt like herself and became furious that no one had thought of this for all, it was literally a 15-year window where she was like, a part of myself that was dead is alive again. And they didn't even bring it up as a possibility. That is disgusting that we don't do that more carefully.
And also, Robert Kennedy Jr. is on TRT, and he, I think, has talked about it to some extent. And I think the more there's such a stigma, and it's just like this is a natural part of your body. And so
I would, by the way, I'm going to see him right now. That's why we had to do this a little bit earlier. It's his birthday. I'm going to a little party for him. And this isn't happening right now.
No, we're airing this Wednesday.
Yeah, good. And because I was told don't talk about because he's not got security, so he has to be really careful. It's ridiculous. Yeah,
it's by design.
But I would take testosterone 100% if I didn't have prostate cancer, which I do.
Yeah.
So I can't take it, but I would take it.
You have cancer now?
I got diagnosed 15 years ago.
Wait, but you don't have it now.
I have prostate. Well, I had a prostatectomy.
Okay.
And I don't have it now. Look, whenever a surgeon says we got it all when it comes to cancer, it's 90% of the time bullshit.
Oh.
Unless it's just a skin cancer.
Okay.
So consistent with that, 10 years after my prostatectomy, I needed a little radiation, which I got, and everything's undetectable now. Okay. So hopefully it's gone, at least for the time.
Dr. Drew, running out of time, what has been your favorite part of this interview?
Spending time with Michael Malice.
You are welcome.
Hold on to your jingle bells. Pluto TV has all your holiday favorites for free. Enjoy Christmas classics like Scrooge with Bill Murray or Last Holiday with Queen Latifah. Plus, dive into festive channels like Holiday Movie Favorites by Lifetime or Hallmark Movies and more. Download the Pluto TV app on all your favorite devices and start streaming holiday favorites on live channels and on demand. With thousands of free movies and TV shows, Pluto TV is your home for the holidays. Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.